Well, hello, my Portnaz family and friends. I hope you're doing okay. Whatever's going on right now in this crazy world, I just want you to know that you do not walk it alone, but you have a church body, a community, a pastoral staff who loves you. That's why we do these videos, to remind you that you're not alone and to hopefully encourage you, and like today, hopefully encourage you and bring some kind of challenge to you in your life. And I hope today's devotional will do that. It must be Tuesday because this is Pastor Chad, obviously, bringing you today's message. And I want to do that out of two passages, one out of Matthew, and then we're going to jump all the way back to Proverbs 5, where we began this whole thing months ago. And I want to think through maybe some disciplines or some just ways of Christian living that we can do that the world just may need right now. And I would say this, as I've been watching things on TV or listening to things or watching videos or reading things, blogs and articles and newspapers, Facebook posts, you name it, it seems like everybody is, just to be honest, ready for some kind of fight nowadays, ready to argue and quickly go at their enemy. And I want to start thinking through that. I'm going to challenge us today to think through what that is and who is our enemy. Because it says in the scriptures, our enemies is not human flesh and blood. It's the principalities of the darkness and the things outside of us. But we end up interpreting that upon our neighbor or friend who does not think like us. So what does the Bible have to say about that? Well, we start reading through Matthew 5 and it talks things. This is the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' ultimate and greatest sermon. This is the best sermon ever written. If you don't know where sometimes to even start your Bible reading, you just don't know where to begin. Begin in Matthew 5. It's a great spot. I know it's a weird spot. It's not the beginning or the end of any message, but it's a great sermon. It's Jesus' sermon to the people to begin to teach them what it means to have kingdom way of life, kingdom living. And this is a portion of it. One was entitled the eye for the eye. You may have heard that before. You know, if someone does this, that you can do that back to them. And Jesus, once again, rearranges what that was to mean. And he says, if someone wants to sue you or take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. These are tough words. If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go 2. There's a message that I'm going to have coming up talking about the second mile. The idea that you could be forced by a Roman soldier to carry his stuff. That was part of the Israelite Hebrew tradition or law, that if you were asked to do it, you had to do it. The Romans had a law and you had to follow through. Any foreigner had to do it and carry their stuff and help them with their journey. And it may not have been graceful or wonderful, but you did it. And again, that's 1 mile one way, 1 mile back. And all of a sudden, Jesus now says, don't just go 1 mile, go second. In a sense, this disrupt the system. Don't just go because you have to. Go above and beyond. Show people the way this kingdom works. It's an upside down kingdom. And further on, he goes on to how to love your enemies. And it talks about it. If you love those who love you, what reward is that? He talks about, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, sends the rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. This is in 43, 44 in Matthew 5. This text talks about just an awkward, weird way of living that I don't think we see a lot today. It's what we should see in the church. It's what we should see in those who follow Christ. But sometimes we get so wrapped up with our own agenda, we forget about this kingdom way of life. And then I remember when I was younger in college, I read a book because I took an extra year after I got an injury to my knee as an athlete, as a soccer player in college. And so I finished my theology degree and actually went back and did a kinesiology degree. You probably didn't know that. But I got one more degree just to play soccer basically. But a part of that degree was this administration side of kinesiology. And I had to take this one class on administration. And I read this book on the ABCs of leadership, and it basically talked about kind of a wrapped up analogy of the rocks in a bucket story. If you've ever heard about the rocks in the bucket, it's about putting the larger the rocks in first, then the medium size, then the smaller, then the sand, then the water. If you do it in the right order, then things will fit and things will work, and you can kind of plan your day better. But if you do things in the wrong order and you do the C version, or you put the smaller sand or the rocks in first, then things are just not going to fit, and you won't accomplish what you could accomplish. That's nothing really to do with our message today. It's a really good leadership strategy if you want that. But it does talk about this idea of these rocks in a bucket. And it reminded me today of a passage out of Proverbs 25 that really alluded to this idea of this bucket and rocks. And it says this loving your enemy. If your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. We're on the right passage. This works really well. Goes good with this Matthew 5. And then it says if he's thirsty, give him water to drink. Okay, we're still along the same passage. This is going well. And then it says this, and then in doing this, you will heap burning coals on your enemy's head, and the Lord will reward you. Really, Now, this is the part when I was younger. I was like, now I do all these things. Okay, there's a certain point that you try, and then if you can't, they don't follow through, then heat burning coals and just burn their heads off. Like, I really didn't know what that meant. I didn't do a lot of study in it, but I liked at least I could kind of like get my venting, my frustration out going, okay, there is a point. Whew. Like sooner or later, Jesus, like, let me just like burn them. And that sounds horrible, I know, but you all just lose it. We all lose it at times, and that has nothing to do with that passage. It has everything to do about this idea of buckets. And I brought my handy dandy yellow bucket. I'm sure their bucket looked just like this, right? This idea of putting rocks in a bucket, putting things on someone's head meant this. Have you ever seen the National Geographic when you see somebody walk with a bucket on their head of water or food, and they would walk from one location to another? You may have seen some villagers do this, and they would carry their stuffs on their head. Well, this is what they're talking about. In this whole process of this Proverbs, understanding heaping and burning coals on your neighbor's head, they would get the process because they knew that outside the walls of Jerusalem was where they'd sell things, or maybe even inside the walls, they'd be selling their marketplace, and they would sell in stuff and their goods, and then most of them would have to walk miles and miles back to their home and their residence. Usually those who are better off, they'd be closer to the walls where there would be more protection for them and their family, and those who didn't have those same protection or the money would be further away. And it talked about this enemy as they'd walk by. You would heap coals upon their head as they walked to their village afterwards. That sounds a little strange, doesn't it? Well, it doesn't if you understand the reasons why they're taking the coals in the first place. When you left the marketplace, you would take a coal and you put it in your bucket, and you begin to walk it, and you get coals to your home, hopefully to heat your home up. It was a thing of warmth, of comfort, of substance, of help for the home. This is what the coal was for. It could be heating your food or your bread or whatever you're going to do to bake that night. You see, that those coals were a positive and they were a good thing. And so it says when your enemy were to walk by, doing these things, helping them, giving them food or thirsty, would be like pouring the coals on their head. Why would you do that? To keep their coal warm. You see, if they only had one or two, all they could afford that day. If you put your one or two or three, you had a little more maybe, and you had enough, and you'd already eaten or you'd warmed your home, you could do your warm rock upon their hot rock, and it would keep their rock warm. And so by the time they got home, their home would have a warm rock as well to use. And you weren't even just helping your enemy. The ripple effects go way beyond that. As they walked to their home and got to their place of living, they would get out and take their coals out, and not only would they be warmed, but your actions, it warmed their entire family or their entire home of people who were there. Jesus' way of living is upside down. This second mile living, this way of living joyful, is seeing that you got to get beyond our lens and our arguments and our agenda and see that we may have something to offer somebody else to help get them through what they need to get through, even our enemies. And guys, in this day and age, that's a hard thing to do, but I'm going to challenge you. For people outside today that are not a faith walker or they don't know Christ yet, they need to see faith Christ followers heap burning coals on their enemies' heads, meaning throw substance and love and grace and mercy and forgiveness and compassion upon their neighbors. You don't agree with somebody, you don't like their agenda, their way of thinking, you don't like what they're saying, think through, slow to speak, slow to anger, quick to listen. These things that Jesus remind us over and over again, how to love our enemy, even in times of hurt and pain. To go the extra mile, to understand that God's going to have the sun and the rain upon the good and the evil because he loves and wants to see people come to know him. That is our job as Christians. This second mile living brings joy and generosity and compassion. So it begins to disrupt this system. When the system says you should do it this way and Jesus says no, do it this way, it disrupts things and people begin to question, there's something different about this group of people. May we be a group of people, those who call ourselves Christians, that people would say there's something different about them. God bless you today. Read through Proverbs 25 today, Romans 5. It's great things to remind us what it means to follow Christ.